Imagine this. You go to work tomorrow morning or any morning, you get up, you think you're going to have a good day. Everything seems right. And you walk into your business and you find out that you just lost half of it to the competition. Can anybody imagine that happening in their businesses? You can't? A friend of mine, a fellow CEO, who by the way is no longer the CEO, had exactly that happen to him. He was running a Rust Belt business. It was a commodity type business. And he walked in one day, and it was a little more than one day because he knew that he was in a competitive bid for the commodity products that he had, and he knew that his customer was squeezing him for margins and squeezing him for price concessions. And he felt pretty confident that he was in a place that he needed to be to win the bid. He got there that day, found out half his business was gone. Well, what happens when half your business is gone? Anybody a CEO here, by the way, or anybody run an operation, P&L? What happens when half your business is gone? Well, draconian overhead cuts, right? Starting with who? Right, the CEO. He was the first one to go. He's out of a job. Now, he saw this coming. It wasn't like it really happened overnight, but he saw it was coming. Maybe this is a little too radical for you to imagine. How about this? Anybody in commodity businesses here, Rust Belt kind of companies? Nobody? Everyone's here to see a Rust Belt presentation, and none of you are in a Rust Belt company? What kind of companies are you in? Give me some sense of industries. Plastics. I do that too. Go ahead.
Medical devices.
Medical devices. Wow, that's complicated these days, isn't it? What else? Gaskets, great, I make those too. What else? Construction equipment, that's a tough business, but things are going to get better now, right? This trillion, is it? $1 trillion you're going to get your share of that, I bet. Anybody here run an operating organization? Are you in charge of manufacturing or P&L? Raise your hand if you're in charge of making things happen. Okay. So here's something that's a little less radical for you to imagine, perhaps, especially if you're in construction or gaskets would be a great example. Medical devices, maybe not so much. You're in the commodity business. Everybody's got the same thing that looks the same way, doesn't it? And when you're in the commodity business, your costs continue to go up, your prices continue to go down, or at least if you're lucky, they stay flat. So where does that take you 10 years from now? It's not a physics exam. Where does that take you 10 years from now? Out of business. You're on a business curve. So that's the most important thing you have to see and take away from this presentation. I was in exactly those situations, and I saw them. I'm in them right now, actually. I saw those situations developing in my company 2 to 4 years ago. My biggest customer was threatening to take all their business somewhere else, and I believed them. And all my other customers were squeezing me for margins because after a lot of years of having patent-protected plastic products, all of those patents had run out, and I was faced with the same situation. And so I decided I needed to do something fairly radical to get out of it because I knew where my company was going to be in 2 to 10 years, and I wasn't going to wait for what happened to that friend of mine and get invited to leave the company. Now, just let me give you a little before and after so you get some sense. This is the product set that we used to have for many, many years. And as a matter of fact, I still have a lot of those products. Dumb metal, and I didn't show here on this presentation, we do a lot of plastic, injection molded, reaction molded, so we have a lot of plastic products, but basically low technology, dumb metal products that are commodities and that anybody can make. Actually, this thing here on the top is nothing more than piano felt stuck in a wick carrier. This is what we've morphed into. I still have some of those products on the left, but you can see that we have an entire suite of high technology products on the right-hand side. Those products run on self-healing neural networks. They have accelerometers in them. They can measure circadian rhythms. They have 3 different kinds of sensors to sense the approach of a train. What this suite of products basically does, believe it or not, about a dozen guys get killed on the railroad tracks every year because they don't see that they're working and they don't see the train coming until it runs them down. And even though the railroads have all kinds of complicated procedures to make sure that that doesn't happen, that they're never in a place where the train is coming, well, they seem to be in the place where the train is coming. This absolutely prevents that. And actually, the railroads have a guy whose whole job is to watch for the train that's not supposed to be there. And guess who is the one that always gets killed? It's him, really. So this is the thing I want to tell you about this product set on the right is the technology of this was the easiest part. That was the easiest part. Hardest part was culture, hardest part was organization, hardest part was politics, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, what I'm going to lay out for you is how we did it and how you can do it, and it basically comes in three parts. First, you have to transform your organization. I'll speak about that in a minute. You have to completely, whatever your organization is now, if you're Rust Belt or if you're gaskets or if you're machinery and equipment, or perhaps even if you're in the medical devices, whatever your organization is now in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, it ain't going to cut it when you move into the high-tech world. When you totally and radically transform your organization from what it is today in terms of the products that you make and the channels and the sales practices you use to the new, your organization isn't going to make it. Why? Because everyone in your organization is used to the dumb stuff, the old stuff, right? And they're going to be threatened by the new stuff. So the first thing you have to do is transform your organization. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then, and some of these overlap, by the way, but transformation is the thing that has to get done first. Secondly, after you've done that, you move into the ignite, what I call ignite your innovation phase. We're going to spend a lot of time on that because that's probably what you'll find the most interesting. And then lastly, once you've ignited the innovative, what I call the innovative potential of your company, then you move into the now it's time to disrupt the market. Time to disrupt your competition, time to disrupt the product set, and that's when you move into the disruption phase. So it's a sort of a three-part process, starting with transform to ignite to disrupt. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because I do a whole keynote on what I call the 7 values of ingenuity, and this is how you transform an organization by utilizing the principles of this matrix. This is an integrated, highly integrated system of principles and practices that transform an organization and allow it to achieve just astounding performance. But it's the hardest part and it's the squishy part. Most of it's the squishy part, like culture. I'll talk about culture in a minute. CEOs, I used to have to try to convince CEOs that culture was something worth looking at and something worth doing about. Now I don't have to anymore because of Wells Fargo, right? Uber. And thank you, United Airlines. I wrote a piece for Fortune.com the other day about United Airlines living in values fantasy land. Typical disconnect between a CEO and what I call the bumper sticker values. They're on the wall at boardroom, they look great, but they ain't what the company is. United's values are something squishy like, you know, we do what's right for the customer and we're caring, kind people and all that. How could they be all that and do what they did? And the CEO actually believed that. That's why Munoz jumped to the defense of his employees right away, because he believed my people couldn't possibly do that because they're warm and squishy. But as a matter of fact, they were. But this is actually is a 3-part process where you start with building leadership credibility. You have to do that first. If you want to transform your organization and nobody believes your leaders and nobody believes you and your leaders don't care about the people that work for them, how do you think that's going to work? A transformation. Again, it's not a physics exam. How's it going to work if your leaders have no credibility? They have to have credibility and they have to have respect. Harvard Business School did a study of 20,000 employees in the workforce a couple of years ago, and they asked one question. Do you feel respected by your leaders? Half of them said no. And they said, rank what's most important to you as an employee. Pay, benefits, respect from your leaders. Guess what number 1 was? Respect. But why in the devil, if number 1 is respect, what people want, why do half of them not get it? So you have to build that leadership credibility first. The second thing you do is you build what I call a culture by design, not default. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Most organizations have cultures by default. Does your organization have a culture by default or design? It's okay. No one knows you're here. I won't tell anybody. Well, I could tell you if the data would prove out 95% of all organizations have cultures by default. It ends up being what it is because it just ends up being what it is. United's a good example. Wells Fargo is a good example. Uber's a good example. And chances are you're in an organization that wasn't designed. The culture wasn't designed. It just sort of ended up what it ended up to be. Then the last part is once you build a culture by design, then you have to build today's organization capability. Now, you have to be really good at this. You have to have lean principles. You have to have operational excellence. You have to have phenomenal communications between your employees. You have to have no politics. and your organization, because if you move into the realm of high technology products and you've got a dumb workforce, it ain't going to work out too well for you. So that's really, really important. I won't spend any more time on this because this is an entire keynote. There's a handout that you can get when you leave. Actually, the latest book I wrote goes into this in great depth if you want to learn more about it. Anybody ever, you know what this is? Right. Now, Cirque du Soleil is a culture by design, isn't it? Not by default. What happens with Cirque du Soleil is, well, let me start with what doesn't happen. One of these performers doesn't come into the performance and say, I don't feel like catching you today. I'm sorry. I'm just, it's a Monday or it's a Friday or whatever, and I don't like my boss and I don't like you. And tell you what, I'm not going to give you a vital piece of information as to when I'm going to grab you. Does that happen in Cirque du Soleil? No, it doesn't, because every single employee in that organization comes to work today wanting to do better than they did yesterday. And that's the model that you need to have in your head when you start talking about and thinking about building a culture by design. Oh yeah, now you're going to tell me, oh, wait a minute, Blue, wait a minute. Those guys are, they're liberal arts majors and they're liberal people and this is sort of, they're artsy-fartsy and this is like what they do what they love, or they wouldn't be there. Don't you want employees in your organization that are there because they want to be there? Of course you do. Assuming you have a workforce by a culture by design at default, now you want to move into the how do you ignite innovation, and especially in a company that only makes gaskets. No offense, I only made dumb metal stuff. We weren't very innovative. First thing you got to do as the CEO or as the leader of that part of the organization, you have to make an absolute priority that we are going to be innovative. Innovation has to be a priority. It can't be when you get around to it, when you have the money, when you're not making the donuts, when you're not doing the real work. You do innovation, you have to make sure you firmly plant the fact that the real work is innovation. That's number one. That has to come from the top. If you don't do that, no one will take the effort seriously. Next thing you have to do if you want to spark innovation in your company, get a guru, get some expert in there. What I did is I hired, on a consulting basis, the ex-chief creativity officer for the QVC network. Imagine that. Why the hell would I hire a guy from the QVC network? By the way, anybody know how big that is? Like 10 billion. And when this guy started there and they created that position, they were like 600 million or some damn thing. So I hired this guy to come in and ride shotgun with us, and he still comes into our offices and factories on a routine basis. But I hired him. You don't give it to the human resource department, okay? You don't read a book about it. You don't think that you know all about it and you do it. You bring an expert in and you have him ride shotgun. First thing he did is we took a survey of the organization. How creative are we? We need to know what the baseline is, right? How do we know if we've improved it if we don't know where the baseline is? That's the first thing he did. Did an entire survey, and we found out that we were a little more creative than we thought we were, and I'll tell you why. How many people believe that you're either born an Einstein or you're not? It's okay. Nobody believes it? Do you believe you're either creative or you're not? All right, let's try it the other way. Do you believe that you're not creative? Raise your hand. Do you believe you're creative? How many are lying? I'm only kidding. The truth is, you're in the majority because most people, the minority, most people don't believe they're creative. Most people believe that creativity is either born or not. It's really not. It's a learned skill. And so after we did our survey work, then we started teaching people the principles of brainstorming.
Yes? Please repeat the objective.
Robots can't do things like humans can.
I love that commercial. We taught every single employee the principles of beginning with brainstorming. We taught them all the principles of creativity, but that begins with brainstorming. Every single employee got trained in brainstorming, not just the white-collar people, not just the engineers, people in the factory, people all over the company, because, remember, it's an all-hands exercise. Everybody has to participate. You can't, it's not optional, so why wouldn't we train everybody to do it? So in the beginning, we trained them all on how do you do brainstorming, because you can't implement, and 99% of every brainstorm idea is lame, right? But that 1% is gold. And you can't ever implement an idea you never had. So we had to teach people how to do that. So they knew how to ideation, how to generate ideas and get lots of them. In the beginning, we said, okay, employees, you four are going to work on this particular problem at this particular time in this particular place, and we'll give you the tools, we'll give you everything we need. Fast forward to 2 years after that, and all of my employees now decide what they're going to work on, decide where they're going to work on it, decide on what tools and equipment they need, and they implement the ideas that are worth implementing. Now, how many have that in their organization right now? It's okay because most don't. You have a few brainiacs in the office and they generate all the ideas. Well, what I'm saying is you need to get everybody in your company has to be a brainiac, generating all kinds of ideas. That's how you spark innovation. The next, once you've got it to that point, then you need to unleash what I call, then you're able to unleash what I call the big idea. This room, it looks like an ordinary room. It's actually a high technology room, what I call a Google-like campus in a factory. After our employees had got to the point where they were doing their own brainstorming and doing their own creative exercises and coming up with their own solutions, they came to me and they said, you know what, we could do better if we had, this isn't how they put it, but this is how I heard it, a cool high technology space that was built and facilitates creativity and creative thought. If we had a place like that, we could do more. And I spent $500,000 building this room. Does that shock anybody? This is wired for the internet, automatic light darkening windows, whiteboards everywhere, ping pong tables, you know, we're the beer for lunch squishy crowd. You've heard about us. You know, we don't get anything done, we just drink beer and eat pizza all the time. So, most CEOs, though, won't bat an eyelash about spending $500,000 on a CNC machine, will they? Why? Because they view that, and it is, as an income-creating asset. Well, I view this as an income-creating asset, only the principal difference is this doesn't depreciate. It's always renewable because it's a place where people have ideas. Now, I got a lot of opinions from my board and from other people when I built this room, and they, all right, where's the beef, where's the beef, where's the beef? I can tell you that there were 1 million small improvements that more than paid for this. We used to track them, now we don't bother with that because it's a waste of time to track a result, just get the result done. And 1 or 2 big ideas, including the whole new product set that we have now, came out of this room. So this room, plus teaching all of our employees creativity, and by the way, I say to people, and I said from the beginning, I expect you to spend 20% of your time doing this stuff. And don't worry about getting the work done while you're there, because if you say you got to make the donuts, you know, that's not going to work. So I hired effectively 20% more people so people would have the time and the space. You got to give them the time and the space and the tools to be innovative, otherwise you're wasting your time and you'll have no credibility and you'll get no results. You can't make it an afterthought. And so all of this unleashed the big idea, which is where we are today with our product set. Now, here's what happened. Here's what's going to happen to you. Either before you unleash the big idea or when you start building the big idea, you're going to have a revolt on your hands. You're going to get all kinds of crap. You're going to get people who are going to be against it because it's different and it's scary and it's unknown. Your board will probably be against it because what your gaskets, man, what the hell are you doing trying to make? Are you crazy? And maybe your shareholders will be against it. Your suppliers are going to be against it. So this is what I call the 7th inning stretch. And actually, I've had 2 7th inning stretches since I started down this road. You have to, when you have the 7th inning stretch, now you realize, now you start to see all the skills that I have here don't add up to this new thing that I'm working on. They don't. Now, you have to keep making the gaskets, right? While you're creating the business of tomorrow, you still have to do the business of today, so you need to keep a certain skill set, but then you need to make room in your organization for the new skill set. How you do that's very important, very tricky, because if If people on the old skill set think they're all toast at some point in time, they'll start leaving before you want them to. So you have to show them a path of how you're going to take care of them, which we did. We showed our employees, here's the path of how we're going to take care of you. Most of them now that are getting displaced are working on the new product. We're teaching them how to do that, training them how to do that. And, but the other thing is, so you have to make room for expense, right? Unless you're Warren Buffett, you just can't spend all this money on new cool stuff, and because you just don't have that kind of operating expense available. So you have to reduce the workforce. You have to reduce operating expenses. Cirque du Soleil is a great example. Anybody ever read about them in Built to Last? Cirque du Soleil started as a circus, right? It was just a circus, right? And they decided, we're going to throw out the worst parts of the circus that people don't care about and don't add any value, and then we're going to add that expense back into the new cool stuff that people want. That's the model that you should have in mind when you think about this. You take out the expense of what's not necessary, what's not important. You'd be amazed how many organizations have them. Then you add in the expense that you need to work on the new things. And the other part of this is you'll have people, naysayers in your organization, that no matter what you do, you can't convince them. Don't try for very long because they'll torpedo it. They will sabotage the effort one way or another. And so you'll have to take people out just because they don't believe and they're not going to believe. And that's just the way it is. The other thing is, over the period of developing a high-tech product like this, it's a 2-year period, easy. The market's going to change on you in the meantime, so you have to be ready to pivot. You have to keep a close eye on the market. You can't be stuck on what you developed 14 months ago and say, all right, that's good. You know, we did that. We're not changing that. Damn it, we spent all that money. It's sunk cost. You have to move on. You have to be ready when the market pivots. When it comes to finding, now you've got your cool new idea. You got an idea of the product you want. You got to find a firm to do it. Don't try to hire the people yourself. This is not your gig. This is not your bag. This is not gaskets. You can't do it in gaskets. This may not be medical devices. It's not construction equipment. So you have to hire a design firm that knows what they're doing. In my case, the products that you saw there, they've got, I needed software engineers, firmware engineers, hardware engineers, sensor engineers, vision machine engineers. I couldn't possibly afford to hire all that. And if I could, how do you attract that kind of a talent to a Rust Belt company? You don't. So you go out and you have to hire a firm. The firm that you hire is very important. I'll just tell you 3 things about the firm. They need to be accessible, right? They need to be low cost, affordable, and they need to be in your time zone, and they need to speak impeccable English. Now this usually says you're going to go to an offshore firm, because you can't, a little Rust Belt company who's trying to get through this thing without losing their shirt, you can't go hire in the best United States engineering firm. You can't go out and hire all these people. You can never afford it. The firm that I'm using for this product, and they've done a spectacular job, is half. They're offshore. They're half the price, and they're phenomenal. There's 300 engineers in this organization. I got 12 of them dedicated to me. They're half what it would cost me to get this job done in the United States, either with an outsourced firm or hiring them myself. So that's really important. Now, you got your cool new idea, you know the product you're working on, you have to stake out your market position. Now you're looking at patents first. Anyone here know anything about patents? We got any marketing people here? Okay, so usually what you start off with is what's not getting done in the market. Unmet needs, right? That was sort of like that's what I used to do too. It's the last place we look. We, with the help of our engineering firm, we laid out all the patents that were anywhere in the neighborhood of the product that we were thinking about building, and checked out all the weaknesses in all our claims. It was a killer spreadsheet. I don't know how many columns, how many rows. Found out all the weaknesses in their claims, and that's where we started, with the weaknesses in the patent claims, sort of like the intersection of the weaknesses in the patent claims. Why are they weak? Why weren't they covering this particular aspect of what we think the customer needs? So we sort of compared them with unmet needs in the marketplace, and then the last part of it was, perhaps the most important part, is where can we win? Okay, I got unmet needs, I got patent weaknesses, but if I'm going against General Electric, I'm not going to win there. So you have to try to stake out a position after you've looked at all that, is where can I actually win? And I'll tell you what ours was in a couple of minutes. Now you got to lead the design team, right? Now this is really tough stuff, because you need to integrate them into your organization, right? You can't have a bunch of offshore developers and people inside your organization feeling threatened by them and hating them because they're so much smarter than them and they get all the cool new toys and stuff and they don't. You can't do that. You have to find a way to seamlessly integrate effectively an offshore organization thousands and thousands of miles away within your organization. And I'll tell you, there's only one way you can do that. Well, first of all, I have a design review meeting, integrated design review and marketing meeting every Friday morning, 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and our friends who are thousands and thousands of miles away, it's 2 o'clock in the morning for them. This is the accessible part, right? They're there at 2 o'clock in the morning, their time to be with this design review. And I watch very closely where things start to come apart at the seams, because they eventually do. They just do, and you have to bring them back. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is because I transformed the organization before I got there, there's no bullshit, pardon my French. There's no politics. There's no egos. There's no territorial feuds. None of that. Every now and again, if I can't make the meeting, Vicki records it for me and I listen to the meeting. It's a whole, you'd expect it to be different when the boss is not in the room, right? It's not, it's the same. No bullshit, no egos, no territories. Everybody just working together to make things happen. That's why the transformation of the organization is so important, because otherwise you can't lead this. All this leads you to what's called a minimum viable product. Have you heard of that? Rust belt, some of you have. Rust belt manufacturers, never heard of it. You don't need it. If you're making a gasket, you design the gasket, you get the prints, maybe the customer gives you the prints, you get the tool, you get the mold, you cut it, dock to stock, concept to delivery, you're about, 6 weeks, 2 months. 6 months would be a long time. But when you're in high technology products, you have to begin with what's called an MVP, minimum viable product. Get your idea out there in the quickest amount of time for the least amount of cost, to see if anybody likes it, to see if it's any good, to see what they would like to have different, to get user feedback. High technology companies, medical device companies do this all the time. Rust belt companies don't, and you have to learn how to do that, because otherwise you put some big ass, pardon my French, expensive thing out there and the customers go, that's not what I want. I want it green. Oh man, I gotta go back and do the tooling again and redesign you don't want that. So that's the most important thing that you have to do, is get a minimum viable product out there. Here's what it looks like in our case. That was my MVP. Remember those devices that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, those smaller, much smaller? So we took a traffic cone, the cheapest thing we could find, a traffic cone, and shoved all the electronics in it and made it functional. And all those electronics that started off, and it had to be a cone because it had to be able to sit on the side of the roadbed on a track. And all those electronics that were in there now get stuffed into a really small thing. But this was the MVP. Get it out there in a hurry. We had this from the time I launched the effort until the time this was out was about 9 months, roughly 9 months. And the thing functioned perfectly from our point of view. Didn't miss any trains, didn't have any false alarms, but the customers were saying, I don't like that the thing on the left, that wearable, as a way to communicate with the worker, I don't like that. They didn't like that. So we had to make some changes. The next thing, it looked like this in January of 2016. The customer said, we need something big. Yeah, I know that, thank you. I need something, I can't have a traffic cone out in my rail. I need something bigger and heavier and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want that wearable. I want this thing it's bigger than it looks bigger than it is. It's about the size of a garage door opener, and the electronics in it are unbelievable. We know if the guy's down, we know if he's sleeping, we know if he's got sleep apnea. And guess what the real play is in these products? Based on what I just told you, where do you think the real money is going to be? Productivity, information, right? I'll sell them, it's their information, but I'll manipulate it and sell it back to them, right? You know what the margins are in information? Yeah, right. Whatever, it's good, right? It's good. And then finally, this is what it looks like today. After all the user feedback about what they wanted and how they wanted to see it, this is what it finally ended up being. And that was about $1.5 million. Start of that effort to the completion of that effort. Now, I make decent margins, 40% on average, I guess, right? I know where those are going. They don't get better, they get worse. And so one of the big debates I had intellectual debates I had with my board is whether they should have the shareholders should have taken that $1.5 million or we should have spent it here. And I can tell you, and you will have this. I guarantee you, if you try to make this transformation like we did, this is going to happen to you. They're going to say, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. You can't do that. We've never done that. It's nothing like we've ever tried before. What makes you think you can do it? And everyone will be afraid of it, and your shareholders are going to want to get their hands on that money. And so it's a sales job. You're always selling it internally and externally. Every board meeting I go to, I wouldn't say arguing, I'd say debating it. Half of my board loves this product, half it hates it. So every meeting I go into, I'm ready and I'm locked and loaded for another debate and another debate. We won't call it an argument. That's just the way that is. Any change that you would want to make that's have any value, you're going to have naysayers, right? So you need to be prepared for that. Can't give up at the first sign of resistance because you're going to have most of it. All right, so now you got this cool product, right? But you can't go to market with it with your old Rust Belt clothes on, now can you? First of all, no one will believe you. Now, in my case, I was a dumb metal and plastics manufacturer, and I knew one of the market problems I'd have is my competition would paint me right into the corner of, these are the dumb metal and plastics guys. What the hell makes you think they can do this, right? So we needed to be prepared for that, and so we started off with changing our entire positioning. I had this vision in my head, and I still do, that we were going to own, since now we have this great, cool suite of safety products, I wanted to own the safety space in the rail industry. This is part of where you can win. No one had it yet, believe it or not. No one owns the safety space in the rail industry, even though the railroads talk safety, 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 safety. Safety is number one. Safety is number one. No one owns it. So I said, guys, we're going to own the safety space. I want to do conferences. I want to do trade shows, I want to do everything. So I had this idea in my head, and I don't know, has anyone read The Secret? I don't know if I buy that or not. For those of you that don't know The Secret, it's like, there are forces in the universe that are with you if you're on the good side, not on the dark side. And those forces are always willing to help you if you tap into them. I don't know if I believe that or not, but I had this model in my head of owning the safety space, and I'm at a trade show, and all of a sudden this guy walks up to me who's on the board of directors of the Safe America Foundation. And he looked at my product and he said, how would you like to join our board? I'm thinking, shit, this is good. I like this. I mean, because now not only can I begin to paint my company as the leader in rail safety, it's the leader of safety, period. And this is positioning that my competition has been having a devil of a time with, because they can't say, well, I don't care about safety. They don't? They don't know about safety. That's odd. And that led to World Safe, which is part of the Safe America Foundation, a World Safe Award for what we call the Zone Guard product, this suite of safety products. So now I'm an award-winning product. So when the competition starts saying, what do they know? Well, it's an award-winning product. Right? So that was how we positioned the company into the safety space. And now this year, we're taking it a step further. We're co-sponsoring a global safety conference in Atlanta, Georgia with the Safe America Foundation. The biggest leaders of industry and government, including probably people from the Trump administration, will be there. National Safety Council is co-sponsoring it with us. And it's a global conference that encompasses technology, transportation, cybersecurity, human traffic engineering, and now suddenly not only are we the leaders of safety in the rail industry, we're like leaders of safety in the world. Now that's very hard for our competition to stop us from. How do you guys do trade shows here? You go to trade shows in the gasket industry? Yeah. So how do you do them? I mean, you got a booth, right? And you put your products out on a table, right? Then you got your guys standing there like this. Right? Is that right? I mean, it's okay. I mean, don't you dare come into my booth. Whatever you do, do not come into my booth. Except when they see their old buddies. Their old buddies are, come on. That's what, rust belt manufacturers do. I was doing it, I know, I've been there. This is, before we change it, this is our guys. Can everyone see that here? All our guys, all my guys and one potential customer, and I don't even know about him, and they're all guarding the booth. Don't anybody come in this booth. Whatever you do, don't come in this booth. This is what we look like now. I don't know if you can see that attractive young lady in the left. She's very bright, she's very articulate. She goes hunting for people to come to the booth. She does. She'll go up to people and she'll say, do you care about safety? In the rail industry, what the hell are they going to say? Well, let me show you something we've got here. So she reels them in. We sit them down with a branded earbud and an iPad, right? And they see our shtick. They see our Zone Guard product in action. And they sit in director's chairs and they have nice, we give them a beer or a drink or whatever. And so, while the rest of them are like this, we're inviting them in and we're giving them a pleasant experience in the booth, if you will. And then we do this.
Looks like a very effective system. My guess is it would be cost effective because you're not having to do all the onboard electronics. Track worker safety is a critical issue, and this looks like a promising technology.
Then my friend Bob back here makes them, and he's really good at this, and he'll probably do this to you too. He invites them to comment on what they just saw. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of videos just like that, because right after they get out of the booth, when they're all hopped up and they like it and they're impressed with it, we get a minute clip, a 2-minute clip, and we put those all in a collage, use them in social media, and we use them everywhere. The next phase of our unorthodox trade shows begins this year, where we created virtual reality. I can't get every customer out on the track for a lot of reasons to see this thing in action, but we can simulate that. And so they'll put on one of these things and they'll feel like they're actually out on the track and this thing is saving their lives. And our competition isn't doing anything like this. All they're doing is they're standing there like this and they're blocking people from coming in their booth. They are. And we're giving our customers an entire virtual reality experience. You have to have fascinating marketing communications, right? You can't have, what do you do now in the construction equipment? You got a trade pub, right? You got trade pubs, right? Buy a full-page ad in the trade pub, say, we are the best, we are the leaders, we are whatever, the apple mother pie thing. That's how you communicate to the marketplace in Rust Belt companies. That's just how you do it, because that's what everybody else does, and that's what you've always done it, so you're not going to do it any different. Well, now you have to change that up. If you got a high-tech company, what we started to do is cause marketing. I know you'll be familiar with cause marketing. Anybody else familiar with cause marketing? It's basically, like when Starbucks gives $1 to every underprivileged somebody or other in the world for every cup they sell. That's basically cause marketing. What we did is we set up a fund for every widow or widower of a guy who got killed on the track before our product was around to say, we're contributing to that fund. And we said to all the rail operators, we realize that some of you can't afford to get started with this system, but everybody should have one. So we're going to give it to you because we feel that strongly about saving lives in the industry. That's cause marketing. And our competition, that took them completely by surprise. They had no idea. They didn't even know what it was. Then, of course, social media. A lot of you would be very familiar with how social, but Rust Belt companies don't do it. We have LinkedIn, we have the website, we have Twitter accounts, we have Facebook. We're putting out blogs all the time. I hired, and part of this, to get the talent I needed for this new adventure, I hired somebody who doesn't do anything but social media marketing. The last part is you have to rebrand. This is part of the old clothes, right? My company used to be called Miller Felpax. Well, that sounds like a high technology company. Boy, sure, I'd like to buy a rocket ship from you. You can't have that. You have to, and this is something, as a matter of fact, Success Magazine did a whole feature article on what we did here. Lessons learned, that sort of thing. You have to be very careful when you rebrand, and it takes time. You don't do it overnight. But we did that, and this is what we looked like in the year 2000, actually up until about the year 2016. In 2013, in anticipation of this, we rebranded the company. to be, instead of Miller Fill Packs, Miller Ingenuity. You can't see that whole logo on the right. Changed our publicly facing trade name to Miller Ingenuity, Invention, Execution, and Engineering. It was a tagline in 2013. And then we changed that all up to what it is today on the right. Miller Ingenuity, safety starts here. Remember, you're wrapping the clothes around everything that you want your positioning to be. And in our case, we are the safety leader. So we start with safety starts here. This just happens to be our suite of Zone Guard products where we say safety in your own hands. And all that, of course, is trademark pending. Last thing I'll say is this is a three-part play. And I've sort of simplified it, if you will, for a 45-minute presentation, but it's a bit more complicated than that. First part, most important part, is you need to transform the organization. Pay special attention to that. Because honestly, if you don't transform the organization, you're going to be throwing a ton of money away when you try to move into becoming innovative and disrupting the market, because your organization will be against it, or your organization won't know how to deal with it because they've only dealt with gaskets and machinery and equipment and plastics and dumb metal, or they won't want to deal with it. So honestly, pay special attention to transforming the organization. And there's a handout outside. You're welcome to get. My books are out there too. I think I do 4 chapters on it, so I would encourage you to read that. Once that's been done, then you have to ignite innovation. You need to prioritize it. You need to provide the time, the tools, and the space, and the encouragement, and the people to do it. Most companies go, oh boy, I want to be innovative. Be innovative. Steve, come on, be innovative. Okay, what does that mean? They don't really provide the tools and the time and the encouragement to do it. And then when things get tough, they sort of roll it back and say, forget that, we can't do that now, we're too busy. It's usually a short-term effort. And then finally, you don't want to go to the marketplace in old clothes when you got new products. Make sure that you're paying special attention to your positioning and your brand and how do you go to market. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
It's very inspirational. Enjoyed his discussion about moving and transforming his workforce from the Rust Belt into high tech. It was very, very entertaining and very informative.
Steve did a nice job of presenting the change in the environment and the culture that needs to happen, and the traps that you can find yourself in, and was able to give us some good examples and some firsthand stories on it. So it was very helpful.
Oh, it was great fun. I've never heard that kind of a story told before, and it took me a while to figure out that it was gaskets, going to trains, going to electronics, and I just loved it.
We talk a lot about change in manufacturing, and I think Steve Blue's got a wonderful example with Miller Ingenuity of really following through on that, establishing the culture base for it, then having that lead into how his team was performing and the product mix that the company was going to have going forward, and then recognizing it's really a process and not something you do once and then you stop.
It's refreshing to hear a story from someone who's lived it, and it's obvious that Steve understands what it takes to really put the energy toward organizational transformation. I'm also in the business as well, and holding the space for an organization's future is exhausting because most organizations are really focused on how am I going to win or ship what's right in front of me. And so it seems crazy to invest in some idea that's unproven, has no precedent, and Steve understands that. So it was incredibly refreshing to be here, to hear from another practitioner who knows what they're talking about because they've been through it.
I just spoke with Steve Blue, and it was a really exciting conversation, speaking about American innovation, and it was exciting and inspirational.
Really appreciated his thoughts and his actions on what it's taking America to become America 2.0 and to bring onshoring and to make it the force that it should be.
I feel it's really exciting to see a lot of new development in the manufacturing industry, driven by maybe emerging technologies such as Internet of Things, big data, data analytics. It's very amazing the potential impact they will produce on the overall industry performance. I feel I am from a university. On the other side, we have a big maybe challenging or maybe responsibility for task like workforce training. I feel I had a good discussion with a lot of people about maybe new content that we might need to bring into the classroom that link the classroom instruction with the industry needs. So I feel it's a great experience for me.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and attention.